Hello everyone, and welcome to my Bold and Beautiful for You channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. The night began like any other along the rugged Malibu coastline, with the kind of soft breeze and rhythmic waves that usually calmed Luna's thoughts, but on this particular night the ocean seemed different, darker, unsettled, almost as if it understood what was coming long before she did. Because Luna wasn't walking along the beach to clear her head or escape the relentless pressure of her life, she was running, desperate, scared, her heart pounding against her ribs as if trying to warn her that she should never have agreed to meet Electra alone. Only hours earlier, Luna had thought she was doing the mature thing, facing her problems head-on after weeks of torment, misunderstandings, and the spiraling tension surrounding Will, Electra, and the baby Luna believed she might be carrying. But the moment she saw Electra standing near the cliffs, her silhouette sharp and motionless against the moonlit sky, Luna's instinct screamed that she had made a terrible mistake. Electra didn't turn when Luna approached, which was strange, almost theatrical, and Luna felt a cold knot form in her stomach as she forced herself to speak, trying to keep her voice steady, but Electra finally pivoted with an expression that made Luna's breath catch. The kind of expression someone wears when they've already decided the outcome and nothing will change their mind. The wind whipped Electra's dark hair across her face, but her eyes were clear, burning with a fury Luna didn't understand, and when Electra began talking, her voice carried a venom Luna had never heard before, accusing Luna of trying to take everything from her, Will's attention, Bill's sympathy, the fragile new life Electra had built for herself after years of chaos and insecurity. Luna tried to explain that she didn't want Will, that she never meant to get caught in the crossfire of whatever Electra was battling inside, but Electra stepped closer to her, too close, and Luna realized this wasn't a conversation at all, this was a reckoning. The waves crashed violently against the rocks below, sending mist into the air that chilled Luna's skin, and for a moment she wondered if Electra had chosen this exact spot on purpose, a place isolated enough that no one would hear them, no one would intervene. No one would even know what really happened if something went wrong. Luna's voice wavered as she pleaded with Electra to calm down, reminding her that there were other ways to handle their conflict, but Electra laughed, a cold, sharp sound that didn't match the gentle night, and accused Luna of pretending to be innocent, pretending to be weak, pretending to be the victim in a situation Electra believed Luna had manipulated from the beginning. Luna backed up a step, feeling the damp sand shift under her feet, and she tried to keep her voice steady as she said she didn't want to fight, that she didn't want Will, that she wanted peace, but Electra only grew more agitated, pacing in a tight circle before turning toward Luna with an expression that made her feel like prey cornered by a predator. Electra's hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with rage she had clearly been holding in for far too long, and Luna could almost sense the moment Electra snapped, the moment all rational thought evaporated and pure instinct took over. Electra lunged, not with hesitation but with a force that shocked Luna, slamming both hands into her shoulders so quickly and so violently that Luna barely had time to gasp before she felt her body tilting backward, her heels slipping, her arms flailing for balance she couldn't find. The cliffs weren't far behind her, just a few feet, but those few feet disappeared in an instant as Luna's body sailed backward into empty air, and everything around her seemed to slow, her breath freezing in her lungs as she stared up at the sky, the stars blurring into streaks of light while the sound of Electra's ragged breathing faded under the roaring surge of the ocean below. The fall felt both endless and instantaneous, a terrifying drop that ripped the scream from Luna's throat before the icy water swallowed her completely, dragging her into a world of darkness and cold so intense it felt like knives pressing into her skin. The ocean pulled her under once, twice, again and again, each wave shoving her deeper as she struggled to find the surface, her lungs aching, her arms flailing against the crushing weight of the sea that seemed determined to claim her. Above, Electra stood frozen at the edge, her hands trembling as she stared down at the churning water where Luna had disappeared, her face pale, her eyes wide with a mix of shock, regret, and the horrifying realization that she had actually done it, she had pushed Luna into the sea. But Electra didn't scream for help, didn't climb down, didn't call anyone. Instead, she stumbled backward, pacing in small frantic circles as lightning flickered across the horizon, illuminating her panic as she whispered to herself that she hadn't meant to do it, that Luna had pushed her too far, that no one would ever believe it was an accident. Meanwhile, beneath the water, Luna fought with every ounce of strength she had left, kicking against the powerful current that kept dragging her sideways toward the jagged rocks, her chest burning as she forced herself not to inhale even as black spots formed in her vision. Memories flashed through her mind in scattered fragments, her mother's smile, Will's conflicted eyes, Bill promising her that she would always be safe, Finn reminding her that she was stronger than she believed, and those moments fueled her determination to survive, even as the freezing water numbed her limbs and made each movement slower than the last. She finally broke the surface for just a second, gasping violently as her head bobbed between the waves, but the wind carried her cries away before they could reach anyone on the cliffs. Electra didn't even glance toward the sound, too lost in her spiraling fear to register that Luna was still fighting. Luna swallowed seawater as another massive wave crashed over her, shoving her underwater once more, and she felt herself drifting closer to unconsciousness, her arms growing heavy, her instincts weakening. Somewhere in the distance, headlights appeared along the curved coastal road, Bill's car, speeding faster than he should have, searching for Luna after she failed to answer his calls, but he didn't see the struggle happening below, didn't see the girl he considered a daughter slipping beneath the surface for what might be the final time. The world around Luna dimmed, fading into a blur of dark blue and muffled sound, and she wondered for a moment if this was truly the end, if Electra's rage had finally erased her future and silenced her voice forever. But then, through the haze of exhaustion, Luna felt something, her foot brushing against a submerged rock, a solid anchor in the violent water, and with the last fragment of strength her body still held, she pushed off of it, breaking through the surface once more with a desperate gasp that tore her throat raw. This time, she managed to grab onto a piece of driftwood, clutching it tightly as the waves pulled her farther from the cliffs and closer toward a narrow inlet, a secluded stretch of beach that no one ever visited, a place hidden by the sharp curve of the land. Electra, still on the cliff, had no idea Luna was alive. She stared at the ocean with the hollow expression of someone realizing her entire life was about to collapse, then finally turned and ran, disappearing into The rain started slowly at first, soft droplets landing on Luna's face as she lay motionless on the wet sand, but within minutes the sky opened up completely, unleashing a downpour so heavy it blurred the horizon and sent sheets of water cascading across the beach. The thunder rolled overhead, deep and angry, vibrating through the ground beneath her, but Luna could barely process the storm. Her body felt unbearably heavy, her limbs numb, her breathing shallow and uneven as she drifted in and out of consciousness. Every inhale brought a sharp sting from the seawater still burning in her lungs, and every exhale felt like a battle she was losing little by little. She tried to lift her head, to push herself up even an inch, but the pain radiated from her ribs to her spine, forcing her to collapse again onto the cold sand. The sound of the collapsing waves kept crashing in her ears, too loud, too close, too relentless, and she couldn't tell whether she was still in danger of being pulled back in or if the tide had finally surrendered her to the shore. Somewhere in her fading thoughts, she remembered Electra's face, the rage, the shock, the twisted satisfaction when she shoved her over the edge, and Luna felt a surge of fear that cut through the fog in her mind. What if Electra came back? What if this wasn't an accident she planned to hide, but something she wanted to finish? Luna's hands curled weakly into the sand, her fingers trembling, but she pushed herself again, desperate to move even a few inches farther up the beach where the waves couldn't reach her. She dragged herself slowly, painfully, each motion sending a bolt of agony through her chest, but she refused to let herself stop, refused to let her story end here in the shadows of the cliffs. Meanwhile, Bill was still up on the main road, pacing back and forth as the storm worsened, his phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders at the officers who had arrived minutes earlier. His coat soaked through, his hair plastered to his forehead, but he didn't care about the rain, he cared only about finding Luna. He had called her over and over again, each time getting only silence, and the dread in his stomach had grown so strong he could barely breathe. There was something bad happening. He felt it in his bones, the same instinct that had protected his sons through countless crises, the same instinct that now told him something terrible had unfolded tonight. When he found Electra's car near the cliff overlook, his heart nearly stopped. He shouted Luna's name into the wind, but the storm swallowed his voice instantly. One of the officers approached him, speaking calmly about protocol and waiting for the ocean rescue unit to arrive, but Bill pushed past him, scanning every inch of the cliffs for any sign that Luna had been there. Footprints near the ledge, 2 sets, one smaller, one heavier, caught Bill's eye and sent a chill up his spine. Something happened here, he thought, something violent. Then he saw it, Luna's bracelet lying near the edge, the one he had given her months ago during a moment he now replayed 1,000 times in his head. His hand shook as he picked it up, staring at the small flecks of sand stuck inside the clasp, and something inside him snapped. This wasn't an accident. Someone had been with her. And the only person missing tonight besides Luna was Electra. On the beach, Luna's breaths grew shallower as the cold seeped deeper into her bones, her soaked clothing clinging to her body like ice. She curled in on herself, shaking uncontrollably as the wind whipped across her skin, but she forced her eyes open, determined not to slip back into the darkness. She needed to survive. She needed to warn someone. She needed to tell the truth about what Electra had done. The rain finally softened, turning from heavy sheets into a steady drizzle, and Luna managed to lift her head just enough to see a faint glow in the distance, a small maintenance road light barely visible along the curve of the inlet. It wasn't much, but it was something, a sign that she wasn't completely lost. She tried to crawl toward it, but her body gave out after only a few inches, sending her collapsing again, her cheek pressed against the cold sand. Her eyelids grew heavy, so heavy that keeping them open felt impossible, and she wondered for a moment if she should just let go, let the exhaustion take her, let herself rest. But then she heard it, faint footsteps crunching through wet gravel high above on the overlook. Men's voices. Flashlight beams sweeping across the cliffs. Search efforts. Bill. She knew it was him. She knew that voice anywhere, even muffled by distance and rain. She tried to call out, tried to shout his name, but her voice came out as nothing more than a hoarse whisper, lost instantly to the wind. Tears pricked her eyes, frustration mixing with desperation, because he was so close, so painfully close, but he didn't know she'd drifted all the way to the hidden inlet. If she didn't make some kind of sound, any sound, he would leave, and she would fade into the night like she never existed at all. Luna dug her fingers into the sand again, forcing her arm to move, forcing her chest to expand despite the pain, and she tried once more to call out. The second attempt was slightly louder, a broken, ragged cry that tore at her throat. Then another, and another, until finally her voice cracked into something that could almost be heard. Up on the overlook, Bill froze mid-sentence, turning toward the faint, distant echo that reached him through the wind. The officer beside him asked what he heard, but Bill didn't answer. He was already moving, heading toward the far end of the road where the cliffs curved around. He called Luna's name, louder this time, pushing his voice past the storm, hoping desperately she would answer again. Luna heard him, faintly, like an echo underwater, and she forced herself to respond, lifting her head enough to cry out one more time before her strength vanished completely. Her body slumped forward, her forehead pressing into the sand as the world around her blurred again, her consciousness slipping through her fingers like grains of wet sand. Bill reached the top of the inlet path, his flashlight sweeping across the narrow carved descent that only locals knew about. Something told him to check it, a gut instinct stronger than anything he'd ever felt. He slipped down the path, grabbing onto the rocks to keep his balance as the mud made the ground slick under his boots. Halfway down, he stopped, shining his light across the shoreline below. At first, he saw nothing but dark water and scattered kelp washed onto the sand. But then, he saw a shape. Small. Still. Half buried by the rising tide. Luna. His voice cracked with fear as he raced down the remaining distance, stumbling onto the wet sand, his knees hitting the ground beside her as he rolled her gently into his arms. Her face was pale, her lips blue, her breathing shallow and uneven. She was shaking violently from the cold, and for a terrifying moment Bill thought she might be slipping away. No, 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 he whispered urgently, brushing the wet hair from her face. Luna, open your eyes. Come on, sweetheart, look at me. She didn't respond, her body limp, her breaths faint, so Bill shrugged off his coat and wrapped it around her, lifting her into his arms as he shouted up to the officers above. Over here. I found her. Get the med team down here now. The ambulance tore through the storm-soaked streets, its sirens screaming into the night as Bill sat rigidly beside Luna, gripping her cold hand like it was the only thing anchoring him to the world. The paramedics worked frantically around her, placing warm blankets over her body, checking her vitals, giving her oxygen, whispering urgent medical jargon that Bill didn't understand but was terrified to question. Her pulse was weak. Her breathing shallow. Her skin still icy despite the heat packs pressed against her. Every time the heart monitor wavered, Bill's own heart seemed to stop. He kept brushing his thumb over her knuckles, whispering, "Stay with me, Luna. Please. Please stay with me." The ambulance jolted as it hit another pothole, the stormwater splashing across the windshield, but Bill didn't even flinch. His eyes stayed fixed on Luna's face, watching every twitch of her eyelids, every slight rise and fall of her chest. He had faced hostile takeovers, kidnappings, explosions, and the darkest parts of his own son's struggles, but nothing felt like this. Nothing felt as terrifying as watching someone he had quietly grown to love like a daughter fight for her life. At the same time, miles away, Electra was speeding down the Pacific Coast Highway, her hands shaking violently around the steering wheel as her breath came in sharp, uneven gasps. She kept replaying the moment over and over, the shove, the look on Luna's face, the sound of her scream before the ocean swallowed her. Electra's stomach twisted so violently she nearly veered off the road, swerving back into her lane as she let out a choked sob. She hadn't meant for it to go that far. She had wanted to scare Luna, confront her, make her back off from Will once and for all, but when Luna tried to walk away, something inside Electra snapped. The jealousy. The insecurity. The overwhelming fear that everyone she cared about would leave her again. It all exploded in one violent moment, and now she didn't know if Luna was alive or dead. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat, messages from Will, from a number she didn't recognize, and finally from Bill. She ignored all of them. She couldn't face Will. She couldn't face Bill. Not when she didn't even know what she had done. Rain hammered against her windshield, making it difficult to see, but she kept driving, faster, desperate to outrun the truth even though it clung to her with every breath. Back at the hospital, the ambulance crashed through the emergency bay doors, and Luna was wheeled out before Bill could even stand. He followed closely behind, shouting questions at the doctors. Was she breathing? Was she conscious? Was she hypothermic? Was she going into shock? But none of them had time to answer. They rushed her through the double doors and into a trauma room, leaving Bill standing alone in the hallway, soaked, shaking, and furious. He pressed his hands against his face, trying to steady his breathing, but the rage inside him was boiling too fast, too hot. Electra had been with Luna. He knew it. He felt it. And the fear in her voice earlier, the tremor when she claimed she hadn't spoken to Luna that day, it all connected now. Electra hadn't just lied. She had tried to cover her tracks. Bill grabbed his phone with shaking hands, scrolling to her name as the storm continued to rage outside. He called her once, twice, 3 times. No answer. The 4th time, her phone rang once and then went straight to voicemail, and that was the moment Bill knew Electra was running. She wasn't confused. She wasn't scared. She was hiding. Meanwhile, Luna lay unconscious in the trauma room, her skin still pale, her body shivering despite the warming blankets wrapped tightly around her. A nurse carefully removed the seaweed tangled in her hair while the doctor assessed the bruising around her ribs and the deep abrasions on her arms. She fought, one of the nurses murmured quietly. Hard. They continued their work, warming 4 fluids, oxygen stabilization, checking for internal injuries, and slowly, the monitor began to show steadier lines. Luna's breathing deepened slightly. Her pulse strengthened. She wasn't out of danger, not yet, but she was fighting. In the waiting area, Bill finally collapsed into one of the chairs, burying his face in his hands as the weight of everything crashed into him. He had almost lost her. He had almost arrived too late. And now the realization that someone he had hesitantly trusted, had pushed her into the ocean made his hands clench into fists so tight his knuckles turned white. He replayed her broken attempts to speak in the ambulance, the faint murmurs that had sounded like she was trying to say a name. And he knew, deep down, exactly which name she would have said if she could. Electra. He lifted his head, his jaw tightening with a determination so fierce it almost frightened him. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. At that same moment, across town, Electra had pulled into a gas station, her hand still trembling as she got out of the car. She splashed cold water on her face in the bathroom sink, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her eyes were swollen, mascara streaks running down her cheeks, her hair tangled from the storm, but all she could see was Luna's terrified expression as she fell backward into the dark water. It wasn't supposed to happen like that, Electra whispered to herself, gripping the sink so hard her knuckles turned white. She wasn't supposed to get hurt. She wasn't supposed to, she couldn't finish the sentence. She couldn't say the word. Dead. Because if Luna was dead, Electra had just thrown her entire life away. If Luna survived. Electra didn't know whether that would be better or worse. Luna would tell someone. Luna would accuse her. Luna would ruin her. And Will would never look at her again. The thought hit so hard that Electra staggered, pressing her back against the wall as she fought the rising sob in her throat. She didn't know that Will had already called Bill 10 times, frantic because he couldn't find Electra or Luna anywhere. He didn't know the truth yet, not fully, but something inside him whispered that the two women had collided in a way that would change everything. He left his house, keys shaking in his hands, and drove toward the beach, desperate for answers he didn't want to believe. Back in the hospital, a doctor finally approached Bill, pulling off his gloves as he spoke. "Mr. Spencer? She's stable. For now." Bill stood immediately, his heart pounding so hard his chest physically hurt. "Can I see her?" he demanded, his tone cracking. The doctor nodded. "Yes. But briefly. She's unconscious, and her body is still fighting severe hypothermia. We need to monitor her closely." Bill didn't wait for another word. He followed the doctor into the dimly lit room, where Luna lay looking so small, so fragile, beneath the blankets. He moved slowly toward the bed, his breath catching as he saw the bruises, the cuts, the way her fingers trembled even in unconsciousness. He sat beside her, gently taking her hand in his. "Luna," he whispered, his voice breaking in a way no one had heard from him in years. "You're safe now. I've got you."